Unmute 1, unmute 2, fade in. We're here.
Oh my god, the fade.
I know. It's amazing. Hey everybody.
Look at the border. Oh, Chris.
These are too big. I'm
digging it. I'm digging it. I've got to try and stay in frame. But
because
I'm a serial leaner. Like the longer the stream goes on, I'll just do more of this. So I'll try and keep my chair in the same place.
Say just as you lean more, just push your chair over more.
Yeah. Well, I don't get much purchase. Well, I get like too much purchase on this chair. I cannot move this chair on this carpet. So if I just keep it in this position, it should be completely fine. Hello, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Now I have to sit up straighter. Apparently, I gained some headroom between. I think I was leaning forward when I was doing it.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, am I in frame? Oh, it was fine. It's fine. I'll try not to lean as much. Oh.
It's okay. All right. Hey. Oh, people here already? Heck yes.
Time for the fudge stream. Hell yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about nothing but fudge. So I hope you're ready. That's obviously what everybody came here for.
Yeah. People are here for the fudge. Not us and our in-depth discussion on RPG.
What's an RPG? I don't even know. It's a type of fudge. Oh,
yeah,
rocket propelled.
The R in RPG stands for fudge.
Oh my gosh!
It's a little known fact, but I will bestow that upon you and your wonderful viewers, who I know most of. Hello.
Pretty sure everybody here knows you, but if not, this is JM8. You should pay attention to JM8. JM8 streams. JM8 has a Patreon over there. There we go.
Mate, the plug.
JM8 does also the Anatomy of series.
I do, yes. I mean, most of you know me, but yeah, we'll get this out of the way. Yeah, I stream. I do things. I got my Anatomy series on The Escapist, where I do game design breakdowns and stuff like that. We do design delves. We're getting people in for that at the moment. But yeah, I do things, and sometimes they're entertaining. Sometimes.
I would say overwhelming majority of the time they are entertaining.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a bit harsh on myself, I guess.
I feel that is
right.
Yeah, it's
the creative curse of only being able to see your own mistakes.
Yeah,
is grim. I
can't look at a video from 2 videos ago and see, and I just see like, yeah, here's what I definitely got to change, which helps with like, all right, let me keep it moving forward, like, you know, get better and better and better. Don't get in a rut and be like, this is perfect, I'll never change. But it does hurt a little bit to just be like, why is everything I make such trash?
Yeah, on my last stream, KC was watching, and I can't remember why it came up, but we were talking about videos, and he said, "Oh, I made a video on Fortnite and why it got so popular."
Yeah.
But it was years ago. And I was like, "Oh, send it to me." He was like, "Oh, bear in mind, like I didn't really know how to edit back then." So I was like, "Oh, that's fine. We'll watch this, and then we'll go watch one of my old videos just so we like balance it out." And KC's was like really good, like as it is with his editing. And then we watched one of my old videos, and I was just like, nearly vomiting at the stuff. I was like, I would do this so differently now. But it's KC was saying during that stream, you got to learn to celebrate your growth and how much better you are, even from a couple videos ago and stuff like that.
That is.
Hello everyone in chat.
Very.
Casey's in there now.
Casey is in here. Hey Casey.
What's up, Casey?
Honey Money, it didn't alert me for the raid. Dang. Hey Honey Money, thank you.
Oh,
hey,
mate,
everybody who came in with Honey Money. How are you all doing? We're talking about RPG stuff today with JM8, who just did intro. Now I have the delayed screen and the like on time screen, and now I'm forgetting which one's which, and I'm like, why is my arm not moving? It's like because that's a delayed one.
But now I'm watching the other one, and your arm is moving, and I'm not sure which one I am now. Where are we? What are we talking about today? What's our topics for today?
Specifically, I think we're going to talk about combat, because you want to talk about how to keep combat spicy, tips on it, and with combat and other things, talking about fudging rolls, mostly in combat,
Yeah.
but it can, play to other things, or
Yeah,
not
yeah.
fudging rolls, because I feel like there is a case to be made for both, and it's very important to decide when to and when not to.
Yeah. I don't think it's black and white. A lot of people think of fudging as like you're a serial fudger. Yeah, that is a sentence. You're either a serial fudger or you are anti-fudge, and you never do it. And I think there are times where it's appropriate,
Absolutely.
and times when it's not. I think a lot of the time, combat might be one of the places where, as a DM myself, and people can give me shit for this if they want, was one of the places I did fudge quite a lot. Well, a lot more than I would anywhere else. Because, and we can see if we disagree on this or we agree. But I think combat, as much as it is its own set of mechanics and it's its own gameplay system, it is also there to serve the narrative. Because at the end of the day, playing Dungeons and Dragons, whatever you're playing, it's collaborative storytelling. So for me, if it doesn't really serve the narrative, then maybe that's a situation where a little bit of fudging might be okay. What do you think on that? What's your stance on the fudge?
Blight brings up a really good point. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat and I'll copy them down and we'll try and answer them, even if we don't get to them right away. I love questions. So Blight mentioning didn't know what fudging roll was until heard out loud. So yeah, fudging roll is when you roll a die and you say a different number, or go, oh, nat 20 and you're like, oh, it missed, but no one sees the die except you. And so for whatever reason, you give a different result to what the die or whatever you're using actually rolled.
Yeah, it's something only the DM can do as well, obviously, because they're behind a screen or their rolls are...
Yeah.
You can't roll as a player, roll to hit, and then just go, natural 20. And
Way more faux pas.
Yeah. Unless you're rolling in secret for some reason.
Yeah.
That would be a really good trust exercise. See who's fudging. Yeah. So yeah, it's faking your rolls as a DM to get a desired outcome. In some ways, I guess you could say it's railroading in a way.
It can be. Again, kind of depending on how you use it. I think pretty much what you were saying, where it's good as a tool, at one, like, that you use sometimes, you don't use other times. Like, it's never, don't be a serial fudger, or if you want to be against it, there are specific reasons. But yeah, like, and I feel like for combat, it is more important than other things, because in most games, combat is built, and I hate this, and this is why I go for games that don't do this usually, but combat is generally built as its own thing, and then the other stuff is a similar RPG, but isn't the same.
Yeah.
And combat has very direct, obvious, and often catastrophic results, versus if you fail at something else, even if you fail at it a lot, it's like, well, there's no hard rule of you die when you miss 3 persuasions in a row.
Yeah.
Versus in combat, where it's like, well, if you take a sword to the head enough times, bye. So yeah, I think it requires for that kind of fluidity that the rest of it has.
Combat has this very, especially if we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, combat is very not fluid. It's very hard. It's like you said, if you get smacked around the head enough times and the goblin rolls well, your character could be dead. If you're not fudging and you're just going for straight rolls and stuff like that, your character could die. And a lot of the times I don't think that, so say it's just like a little incursion, people are going to just do this little reconnaissance mission and they've just got to disable some guards, and then the guard ends up rolling like 80 natural 20s and ends up destroying your tank. That may be a really interesting thing for your players to get out of, or it might just not serve the narrative very well. And in situations like that, maybe fudging might be a way to go. or just letting it go. Because the beauty of these pen and paper games that we're playing is that the unpredictability. But in everything outside of combat, like Jesse was saying, with like persuasion and stuff like that, the player has a multitude of ways to get out of those situations. But especially really early on, with character building, the player doesn't have a lot of options in combat to like get out of those situations, especially if they don't have specific classes in their party. So it just becomes this very dicey, pun intended, situation where it could go wrong really fast, and it's out of the DM's control at that point. So maybe fudging might be the road you want to go down. And it's always the idea of like, how do you build combat, which is something else. We'll probably talk about fudging like throughout this because it's very connected with it.
Yeah.
But it's like, for you personally, Jesse, how do you build combat? What is your goal as combat?
Oh man, I want to hear yours too. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. I really enjoy, because we talked about combat on a off topic, I think, one week. I really enjoy a few things. Like, I want combat to serve the narrative. I think that is one of the biggest problems in making RPGs fun, is when it's like, oh, we need to spice something up. You walk out of the bar and muggers jump you. Roll initiative. And it's like, there's no emotional stakes to it. There's no like reason for it. And then it can just kind of become a slog of like, well, all right, whatever. So I want combat to be generally in story building, you have the peaks and the valleys, and I want it to have an obvious peak, or build it specifically on purpose to be a valley where it's like, shoot, like that it's something that's unfortunate. And then how they get out of it or deal with it, true. But most of the time I want it to be like raising stakes, bam, here it is. And that also combat is not the only way to hit those high points of the story. So emotional stakes, I really like keeping things changing, and I've mentioned this where it's like, I try to make sure every 2 or 3 turns something changes. And you want things to like hit swing, you know, over and over. It gets old even if you're built for combat, just that. So I want something that changes the dynamic. I think all of that's really important, and I try to keep that in mind when I'm doing combat. I am also not big on combat games, so that's a big reason of that too, where I want to play something that allows for more fluidity and stuff like that. What are the big things that you try to incorporate into combat, and how you go into it like mentally?
I think very similar to you. I'm very narrative focused with my combat. One of the big games I ran was a weird game. I'm not sure if I've ever told you about the setting. I
don't think so.
Made for that. If we have time, we can get onto that. I don't want to get too bogged down into that right now. But I always found that whenever I played in other games, combat was a situation where a lot of the players, unless they were specifically built for combat, would kind of switch off. That was the time where people would sometimes get their phones out and do things, and this was no fault of the DMs. A lot of it's because of the systems we're playing in. Dungeons and Dragons, combat is, like Jesse said, a completely separate game. And I like to try and create my encounters in a way that they're driving some form of the narrative forward, be it character progression and the progression of their character, or driving the world's narrative forward. What is my combat adding to the player's experience or world building? And combat was very, very rare in my game. It was only really initiated on very, very rare occasions. And a huge thing I didn't do, which I might get crap for, which is I never really balanced my combat, because I don't believe in it. I think if my players have built their characters in a way that they have all of these different systems, like you said, they've got persuasion, they've got all of these things, they've got all of these tools. I don't want to just put them in a situation where the only way they can defeat this boss or enemies is in a situation where they have to hit them.
Yes.
So I actively don't balance my fights. Obviously, I try and keep it balanced. I'm not putting them in with like an aboleth at level 1. Like I'm trying to balance it, but I don't sit there and dial in the numbers for hours. I'm just like, okay, does this work narratively? Is this going to create an interesting situation? Let's chuck them in with this. They have the tools to get out of it. I think of it in a very similar way to how I design puzzles. It is not my job this is completely the opposite of how you design a puzzle for like a game. But for pen and paper, it is not my job as a designer to come up with the solution, the one solution for these players to do the thing. They could all have different ideas, and if it works in line with their character or the world, then it works. Let's go with that. And I view combat the same way. If the player comes up with a really creative situation, fine. There was in my setting there was this sect of pirates called the Spell Sails, which were pirates that sailed across sand by having telepaths in the bottom of their ships. And they chained them up and they made them float across the sand. And there was this big moment where I was introducing a new big bad, and I see Jimmy was in that game. He's in the chat. And I wanted to introduce this big bad, and they were going to get attacked by this big galleon, this floating galleon. And they have like telekinetic cannons, and they just blast through the sand. It was this insane thing. And there were loads of enemies on this ship. And for me, it was like, okay, this is going to be combat. They can fight, but they're never going to do it. Like, it was a situation where I was like, they're never going to do it. And it turns out that one of them snuck onto the ship and took over the ship from the inside. And then my players then had a galleon and they basically kicked it because everyone got off the ship to interrogate them. They just stole the ship. And then I had to be like, okay, that's this is what you have, a giant telekinetic galleon now. And you have to just roll with it. And I think that's the opposite of what I'm saying with fudging, which is maybe in those situations, maybe I should have been like, oh, the roles were a little bit different on my side, so that didn't happen. Maybe that would have created a better experience. But my players had a creative idea. They wanted to do a thing, and a lot of the time, I think as DMs, it's part of our job to try and facilitate creative thinking from our players and allow them to do those things. So that's how I do my combat. I'm just like, okay, here's a situation for you to get creative. Be creative. And it's less about dice rolls and it's more about thinking. And that's how I try to keep my players engaged. But that doesn't always work because turns out if you don't balance your fights, sometimes they're horrifically hard. And that's when fudging comes in. And I'm like, oh, I've overtuned this. This is bad. If this guy hits like it does a good roll on his attack, he will just kill someone. So I need to dial back their stats a little bit in the background. And I think that's another form of fudging. It's not just necessarily dice rolls, but also the health of enemies. If there's a situation where I am attacking an enemy, or one of my players is, and in line with the story, it is they've just described a way to kill them or do their big attack or something, and it makes sense narratively that thing would die from that. Sometimes I'll just be like, yeah, that kills it. It may have 50 more health on its counter, but I'm just like, that works. That's a really cool situation. We've told a really cool story there. Next enemy, rather than the opposite side of that is being like, okay, well, it did 10 damage, it's got 40 left, and then you did a cool thing, yeah, but like stuff you. Now all of you have to hit it 5 more times, and there's 5 more turns. You've lost that cool situation, and you've gained more. Well, I'm just hitting a thing and health bars, and I don't personally think that's what combat should be. And I'm glad you agree. What are some systems you think that have good combat?
I think. Oh, Kronk just followed. Hey, thanks. Hi.
Wait, Kronk's one of mine. What a lad.
Man, I really enjoy for combat probably Savage Worlds.
Okay, I've never played Savage Worlds.
It's fun. So real quick synopsis. You have your stats and your skills, and how good you are at them is the die you roll for them. So your baseline is a D4, and then if you get better at it, D6, D8, D10, D12. And then they're also exploding. So if you roll the highest number on whatever die you're rolling, you roll it again and add the numbers together.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, exploding dice is a very, very fun mechanic that other games use too, but it's fantastic. It's really fun. It adds a lot. Yeah. It also adds, I think it's good at combat because it means that a fresh minion with just the absolute basics can, if they stab you in the neck, can be deadly or can do a lot of damage, because if they explode, then they did a really good job at it. And it gives everything a level of threat.
Yeah.
And there are ways, like they use a Benny system, so you have like chips that you can use to re-roll dice or like soak wounds so you don't die immediately. But how you spend them is important. And if you're out and then, your level 1 minion stabs you in the neck and you spent all your things to like re-roll your gambling rolls earlier, ooh, that's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
So that's probably my aside from, I made my own lexicon, blah blah plug. Of course I love that one, but like outside of that, that's probably it, because of how dynamic that can be and how like it's swingy but in a good way. And they have like mechanics like Benny's to help with that swing and make it more fun and more understandable and more enjoyable, rather than just being like you roll high, you hit, you roll low, you don't, and that's the swing, because you just have like that's the thing that I complained about with D20 or D&D is that swing. In early levels, the D20 matters so much more than your bonuses.
Yeah.
So that's what do you like for combat as a system?
See, I'm someone who hasn't experimented a lot with different systems. I'm very firmly in the Dungeons and Dragons world. That's why I'm interested in asking, are there any like Savage Worlds, like you just said, like ones that do explore it in different ways? Because I'm not very familiar with it, and what I've done is just modify Dungeons and Dragons to the way I think is better for my world. I think something you touched on there, which is really important, is threat and having a need to pay attention to the combat and stuff. And I guess what I don't like is I don't want my players to go into a combat situation and look at it as through, I guess I do want them to strategize, but not think about numbers. I don't want them to think about, right, so this enemy will have this much health, and if we hit him enough, he'll die. Right. And if we do this, this will happen. And I think that's why I didn't balance my my combats and my characters, because again, another character that my players interacted with was a Siamese cat that had so in my world, guns were a thing, but they were incredibly rare because there was only a certain amount of them and a certain amount of bullets. And this Siamese cat had 2 revolvers. He was
my gosh.
He was the bodyguard of the main villain in this town. And in my mind, just like the giant galleon, I was like, they're not going to go near this guy because he can literally kill you with one attack. This is like, these are murder sticks, effectively. They each have 6 bullets, and he has 12 bullets, and they won't go near him. And in creating a giant threat like that, my players flipped it on its head and were like, I want that. So they found a way to incapacitate him.
Oh no.
And they took the guns. And then they just had them. And then I had to work around that. But I wanted to create a threat, hoping for interesting combat. But in a way, they did have combat. The combat was incapacitating him and eliminating that threat. They eliminated that threat narratively. Actually, not narratively, because he went ballistic because he stole his guns. So he like started running up balls and stuff. But they had a threat. They had combat, which was, here is the threat. We need to eliminate it. They then used their creativity. I didn't say, your job is to take the guns from this creature. That is combat. Go. You are locked into this situation until one of these things happen. You're not leaving. Which is how I view combat. I view combat as this change in mode, like you described it. It's a completely separate game of, we've just had our really fun RP and our exploring, and now roll initiative. Okay, it's a completely separate game. We move differently, we act differently, everything's happening at a different speed, and I find that breaks everything down and everyone starts going into a different mode, and that's when they get phones out and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. So here is a combat situation. There is a threat in this town. He will and can kill you very fast. It is your job to eliminate that threat, be it sneaking, be it incapacitating him, be it killing him, be it using RP to like get other characters to do certain things. That's how I present threats and combat, and then it's up to my players to figure that stuff out. And I think, I mean, some of the players are in the chat, but
they'll call you out if this is untrue.
For interesting scenarios and memorable things, because I can't remember who said it. I think it was Matt Koval, but I can't remember the exact quote, so I'm not going to attribute it to anyone. But it was, the players don't really care about per se. They don't really care about, say, our big bad that we've created and our story that we are trying to tell. They don't really care. They care about how they slot into that and how they affect that world and the things they do. Them fighting that Siamese cat and dodging bullets and then hitting him enough till he's dead is not memorable. Maybe they might say, oh, the character was kind of interesting, but giving them the opportunity to just do whatever they want and solve the problem makes for interesting scenarios and things that they can call back on and be like, oh, I remember this. Oh yeah, the quote was, the player is never gonna quote or tell their friends what your bad guy was or how cool they were. They're gonna say memories they had of what they did and the actions they took. So you have to give opportunities for your player to do things and to do interesting. And fudging is a huge part of that. It's like, technically, could you take those weapons from the cat? Is his AC like too high? Could you do those things? Technically, no. But it's really like, it was so creative the way like they did it and everything that I was like, let's let it go through. Let's have this situation.
Yeah.
I'll avoid combat at all costs, like standard locked into place combat. I'm not into it, but maybe that's because of D&D and I've been conditioned with combat I don't like.
It's definitely, look, I'm not telling you that the grass is greener on the other side of the RPG fence, but it's lush and the grass is greener on the other side. There are other games that do it much, much better. And I think probably would support what you want out of it. Because I look at combat in very similar ways you do, where you were saying you want to, the opposite of having the hard limits of a like video game. And that's what I love about tabletop RPGs is I get to present a problem, a situation to players, and I can account for a few things, and then I go, here's an issue, and watch them solve it. And they might fight their way through it. They might do something else. There was one of the mainly combat scenario, because that's our main theme, but it's like, here is a a steam-powered mechanical Hydra.
Okay.
You know, you gotta defeat it. And so like they'd tear a head off, and then like little arms would come out of it and like bolt on a new head on it.
Oh, mate.
So like, you know, it was like really fun, but I knew they had a lot of stuff against organic creatures. So I was like, oh, so it's a construct, cool, you know, it's doing this, here's how it would work. And one of the players was like, well, you know, they tore off its head. And I was like, all right, you know, cool, it's very Hydra. And the player was like, is its neck hollow? And I was like, well, yeah, it has a, you know, spit attack, so it's, you know, pretty hollow in there. It's like, cool, I'm gonna jump into the hole in its neck. And I was like, okay. He's like, then I'm gonna change form into a larger creature and plug it and try to overheat it because it's steam powered.
Oh,
and I was like, all right, like, and that's kind of what you were saying, where it's like, here's the thing, that's not anywhere on the character sheet I made. That's not in the mechanics of the game.
Nope.
But it's a beautiful thing that I want to reward that creative thinking of, all right, here's, rather than just trying to punch your way through it, here's how to use something specifically tailored from it against it.
Yeah.
And it's like
rewards the word there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it then encourages your players to think creatively everywhere in the game. And if you allow them to be super creative in your RP and how they navigate the world politically, and then they get into combat and it is just hitting effectively, it might be a metal stick, but you still are just hitting things with sticks till the numbers go down. Very video gamey, like Jesse said. If you allow them to be just as creative in combat, their entire experience and how they look at the world is going to completely change. And no threat is going to look too big. I mean, sometimes things can be too big and you're like, okay, we definitely can't kill that.
Mm-hmm.
You do the anime thing where what is it? It's a terrible trope, but it's the when you have a strong character introduced and they're strong, and then you have a bad punch them once and then they die, and they're like, look how big this big bad is. Oh, he's so strong. Don't do that. But you could do that if you wanted to just show something was too big. Yeah, reward that creativity and allow them to just, if they have an idea, at least try. And it's one of the things I tried not to do, which is straight up just say no to things.
Absolutely.
It's instead of just going, no, that doesn't work, let them try. Even if you know in your brain that's not going to work, it doesn't matter if they roll a 20, that just in the confines of my world, that will not work. Let the character attempt and fail. And that will then create new, more interesting situations for that player to then get out of.
Yep.
But it's weird. And yeah, number one for me is always narrative. Does it serve the narrative for the character or the world itself? That's number one for me. Warfare.
I'm assuming when you just tell them no is warfing.
Yeah. Is that what it is, Jimmy? Warfing is when you tell someone no.
It's a video of just Worf getting shot down by Picard. It's like a super cut of just him being like, we could do this. Picard's like, no. like 5 minutes of that.
Wonderful. I love that all tiny D&D things have names. Like just the smallest little interaction with your players has this like completely separate like wording for it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It is one of the delightful things about it.
Would you say?
Well, go ahead.
Chaos? Yeah, I was like, because I'm just thinking about what we've got planned to talk about. Would you say that chaos in dice rolls is something that adds to these situations, or do you think the dice rolls then make it kind of restrictive? What's your opinion on that?
It's a great question, mostly because it's very dependent. I feel like what the tone of the game you're running is and the story you're telling is very important to that. Because, okay, I guess 3 things. So like that, what's the tone? If it's supposed to be a power fantasy, it's not fun when someone gets one-shotted or anything.
No.
One way or the other. Well, actually, no. If it's power fantasy, one-shot, the bad villain can be really fun. So like, fudging rolls for that, cool. You know, again, it plays to the narrative, or, you know, fudging in the sense of, oh, you one-shotted the big bad, cool. Well, then this other thing happens, and like, aha, that was just phase 1, and I'm not making up phase 2 right now or anything. Or just repurposing everything you didn't get to do later. That's the best trick. But, you know, fudging for that can work. Or not fudging for that, I guess. But sometimes fudging, I feel like, is very important to not do because of the chaos. And there's especially when you're doing something like a horror game, where your dice roll is very dependent on, hey, chaos affects everything. Like, it's going to affect me as a GM, it's going to affect you as a player, it's going to affect all this stuff. We're going to roll our dice in front of each other, and like, if you get your head split in one turn, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Like, if you one shot the boss, same thing. Like, that's fine. And having that level again of tension, of knowing, like, if I engage with this, there is a chance, maybe slight, maybe not slight, that it'll end poorly for me. And then there's things where mechanically you have to fail. So I'm not a huge fan of Powered by the Apocalypse as a system, but a cool thing I do like about that system is you get XP on failed rolls. So if you're doing everything, oh, hey, B Pendragon, resubscribe. Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. If you fail a roll, that's your XP point, and then when you get enough XP, you level. So you know, if you just always do what you're good at and you always succeed, you don't actually grow. Yeah. And I think that's interesting. And games like Dread or Starstruck, which I brought up, that use a Jenga tower instead of dice, and you know failure has to eventually happen, and that's part of it.
Yeah, that's super, super cool. I think Monster of the Week does...
Yeah, that's powered by one of the Powered by the Apocalypse games, Monster of the Week.
Yeah. Which I love. That's one of the only other long-term games I played. Jimmy, who's in chat. For Jay, Monster of the Week runs off this system. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jimmy ran this Monster of the Week game, and it was, I think, because of the way that system works, was my most enjoyable pen and paper thing I've ever done. Was because I always felt like if I knew my character and I knew my constraints of my character, I could creatively do basically anything. And it wasn't very super dice dependent, and even on failure, I was growing, which I think is like as close as we can get to real life, right? Like,
yeah,
you can practice, but also you learn from your failures. So I really like that as part of that system. But yeah, I agree. The fudging can be good if it serves the narrative, and I think embracing the chaos is just as important if it serves the narrative. I'm trying to think of a situation where chaos could ruin something. Say, like, you know, your I was just about to say, like, your main character, like the main character in your game has just done their big speech and they go to swing at the big bad. They're about to decapitate them, right? It's the final hit. They do their big speech, but they roll a natural 1 and they whiff. Do you know what? I wouldn't fudge that because that's hilarious.
Oh yeah, that's great.
But that's the situation where you would embrace it, right? You'd be like, that's just really funny. We can get a new narrative beat out of this. But if it's just, it doesn't really gel and it just becomes numbers games, in situations, then it is okay, in my opinion, to fudge. And just be like, yeah, it kills them. It kills them, or you miss. Because it's just, I just don't ever want my combat to become a numbers game. I don't want my players to be thinking about numbers. Yeah. I want to be thinking about what they're doing as characters.
That gets me with like weapon choices too, where it's like there are, in a lot of games, weapons have stats, and it's very obvious, like, well, this one does the most damage, so I guess I'm gonna wield a broadsword even though I like spears more. Like, no, I want you to be like, here's some cool ass shit I can do with a spear, so I'm gonna use a spear. Like, do it. Yeah, I fully agree with you on that. It's a really good question and a really good comment, so I want to bring those up.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Doc the Gray says, as for combat in a power fantasy, I think one of the best reference materials for how to build combat counters is to look at professional wrestling. In that, at the end of the day, the combat should always be aiming to make everyone look good and excite everyone to participate rather than less. Participate more rather than less. I think that's a really good example of that.
Completely agree. That's a great example.
I also like professional wrestling, so it's easier for me to be like, yeah. But yeah, that it is like, it is sort of made up of like the big moments of like failure and success. And that
100%.
the only reason it sells for one person is because the other person is selling it with them.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
If you watch professional wrestling, like, and you see someone like take a big hit, it's because both people were working together. If it looks bad, it's easily like one of them could have just not been doing it right.
Yeah, for sure. I think something you said before, which was threat and then the potential of failure, is such a huge part. If you sat there fudging dice rolls every day just to keep this power fantasy alive for your players, and there are no stakes and there's no chance of failure, players again will just stop caring about combat for a completely different reason. It doesn't mean anything. It's like there's something in game design called juxtaposition gratification, which is you've got to have the juxtaposition between power levels. If you give the player the one-shotting sword at the beginning of the game, combat becomes boring and becomes meaningless. You have to build up to that, so then it is satisfying when they get it 50 hours in. Then suddenly that thing that was boring for the first 50 hours becomes immensely fun because you've slogged through that stuff. And it's the same with crafting combat in any system. If you go in and one-shot everything, there's no meaning to any of it. You've got to build up to it, and this is why pen and paper games are so fun. And for when people get their teeth into them, why I think nearly everyone becomes addicted to them is because we don't have this freedom in video games. There is no game that comes close. The best like pen and paper-ish video game I've ever played is Divinity Original Sin 2, which is a fantastic game, but it doesn't even come close.
Yeah.
It's pen and paper. It just doesn't touch it.
As many options as that game gives you, and it is impressive the amount of ways it lets you solve a problem. Like, there was I needed to, in that game, I had to get like a talking magical severed head that it couldn't move by itself, and it wanted me to rescue it, but it was on stage as part of a play, and there were always people around, and it's like, how do you do this? And I think I ended up like throwing a smoke bomb and then snagging it and running. It's like, even the immense ways you could do it in that, still does not stack up. And I agree, that is probably the closest, and it is still a shadow of what you can do.
It doesn't even touch it. Lammy says, disagree, Jay. One Punch Man is a concept about one-shotting everything and is still fun. It's fun to watch and read. I don't think it would be fun to play. It's different when you're in control. It might work in a pen and paper situation, actually. You know, if the DM was really good at setting up escalating bad guys and scenarios for you to monologue at them, or in One Punch Man's case, not monologue at them. But you know, if you could just one-shot everything, there is a dimension to gameplay that is completely lost. You can get to that point, but it has to be earned. Yeah, they're quite bored. Yeah. Is not happy. Yeah, for sure.
Which is the joke.
That's how players would be. That's a great. See, if I ever talk about juxtaposition gratification in a video, I'll use the One Punch Man example. Thank you, guys. That's a wonderful comparison. But yeah, embrace that chaos. Embrace failure.
Absolutely.
As long as it does stuff, it has to do something. It can't just be numbers. It has to be, oh, our cleric is dead. whoops, like there has to be a driving force, a reason. There has to be like a reason for people to care. I remember in a game I played where I was so distraught when a character died, I folded their corpse up into a backpack and carried them everywhere with me, just in case I could like raise them, and I kept them with me and stuff. And then the bag got ran over by a boulder, and they were really done.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was pretty grim. But those situations were brought on by failure in combat, which is and it created a memorable situation. So it's not about fudging for success. It's also about sometimes, in a very rare situation, fudging for failure. If it would make an interesting situation. I'm not saying fudge your dice rolls to kill your PCs. Actually, I am. Fuck it. Yeah, you heard it here first. Jay says kill your PCs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Quoted.
All of my ogres rolled nat 20s at the same time.
Amazing. What are the odds?
Yep.
Yeah, I think not fudging to serve the narrative helps too, because I've had that where we were in like a gauntlet of combat one time, and ultimately and my character ended up dying, and it was a really powerful moment and like a really cool moment, and like I mean it major bummer, but like it served the story well that this was a threat, and that despite all our best efforts and like the best we could do, one of us still fell there that day. And that the DM was like, hey, we're gonna roll, we're gonna see what happens, and that's what happened, and it was good. So I'm glad they did not fudge it.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Totally served you well. King Dead brings up, never be afraid to fail forward in the scenario if it's necessary to move forward. Yeah, failing forward is chef kiss. Like, just always have that in mind.
Yeah, and forcing players to think creatively. Like, I've had players in my group who have been very combat orientated and very numbers focused, and I'm not that type of DM. And also, when I say all of this, I do not mean to disparage or talk badly of people who do like the numbers game of D&D combat. If that is your thing and you've got players that enjoy that kind of playstyle too, more power to you. There's loads of ways to make combat interesting just with the numbers themselves. But I had someone in my group who was very numbers focused, and it was about failing forward is a beautiful way of putting it. It's having the failure which forces them to think outside the box. Like, and you can create enemies like this, like enemy design, and making tweaks to what you see in the monster manual, and or in any other monster book you're using for your system, making slight tweaks to make them interesting to fight with your party specifically. If your party is really good at doing certain types of damage or fighting certain monsters, but that's what you're doing in the game, right? That's that you can change the monsters, but you can also tweak them. You are in charge of this world. You can do whatever you want. That is just, you can fudge that. I just want other ways to say the word fudge. You can fudge the stats. Like I said, with tweaking health mid-combat, like this enemy has 200 health, but it makes more sense at this moment for it to have 50 because of a certain reason about that enemy. It has an ailment. It is, missing a limb. It has been in battle recently. It hasn't been able to rest. There are so many ways that you can contextualize fudging, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. There's so many ways you can contextualize it. It just needs to serve the narrative. But yeah, failing forward and being like, right, how am I going to make my players think outside the box and not play it like a numbers game? And I always did it the way I did with the Galleon and the Siamese cat and things like that, which was just, my enemies are way too strong. They're just so powerful that you can't just hit them and do the numbers game. You have to do something else. And even if you do engage them in straight combat, you have to think creatively. You all can't just roll attack and then it will die. One of you has to do something different. One of you has to change. And I always find in parties, there's always a handful of people who play very differently to everyone else. They're usually bards, and it's like they're playing a different game. And sometimes in those situations, straight combat ain't good for them. Those are the people that get their phones out.
Yeah.
Because they want to go court the barmaid and do some RP, and this is just the thing they have to get through until they get to do that. Give them an opportunity to be like, I can try and talk them out of this mid-combat. I can try and do all these creative things, and it's not up to me as a DM to think of all of the 1,000 different possibilities of what they could do to this enemy. Obviously, you think as many as you can. You want to be prepared. But it is up to the players to come up with that stuff and to come up with their creative ways and what their character would do. You as a DM, you are in charge of the world, but nobody knows that character better than the person who's playing it.
Absolutely.
That is their character. They'll know what to do. So you just let them do it. And this is why I don't say no, because if you say no, they're not going to try things. They're just going to go, oh, okay, I guess it's not I tried it and it didn't work. It's just like, oh, the DM won't let my ideas happen.
Yeah.
So you've just got to, it's just about how you phrase things. Don't say the word fudge.
Insightful also brings up, if you give the GM fudge in the middle of combat, things might start going your way. That's very true.
For sure.
I had a group that, like, we had open rules about bribing. Like, we had a system of, like, here's how much these food items are worth in game. That we all, like, agreed with, because we had multiple DMs in that too. So it's just like, oh, slice of pizza for this reroll? Oh, absolutely. Like, yeah.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's just getting people to think creatively about what they're doing. Getting them out of that mindset of, I am rolling dice. I think the dice, I do want to explain, I'm not completely against dice and like the numbers game and stuff like that. I think rolling is an integral part of pen and paper games. I think the chance of things going wrong is a huge part of this experience. It's just getting people to think of it and not, I think it's just combat stats I don't gel with. I don't gel with health bars and people thinking about that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same in video games. I don't think bosses should have health bars. I think it encourages reckless play. I don't think it should be a thing. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. Yeah, so it's just how you frame things, really.
Yeah. King Dead brings up, instead of saying no, usually better to say, what exactly are you trying to do? Yeah, like, if you know, like, I'm gonna shoot my gun at the sun to try and blast it out of the sky. Like, okay, technically, no, that's not gonna work. But, like, yeah, like, expand on what you're trying to do. And, like, understand what they want out of the situation. And then they might be able to do it. Or that way, when they fail, because you can't shoot the sun with a gun or whatever it is they're doing, you can play up the outcome of what happened based on something that in the information they give you of what they wanted. So then you can intrigue them with something.
Yeah, and also make them think about what they're saying. Like, getting them to say, okay, so what exactly are you trying to do is a good way of phrasing it, because they'll have to explain it in greater detail than they have thought about it.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, have you ever, like, thought of something in your head and then said it out loud and gone, that's dumb?
Oh, never. No, I don't know.
I do that. All right, I do that all the time. I do that all the time. I'm like, yeah, especially on game night, I'll be like, I'm gonna say this joke's gonna land. This is gonna rock the boat. And I'm like, why did I think that? And this is what you're doing for your players. You're giving them the opportunity to say it out loud in greater detail and go, actually, that's dumb. That's not gonna work. Okay, actually, I could do this. Or I always think, again, along with, they're usually the bard, but there's always the character that will say something and be like, oh, I want to do this. And it's like a joke. I'll just be like, okay. And it will happen because they told me they wanted to do it. So I'll just be like, okay, that happens. Because there's time and space for joking. We're having fun, right? But
Oh yeah.
sometimes players do it. They'd never give a serious suggestion. They just do a joke one. And I always find that's usually because they're bored of the numbers game. They're bored of the locked in combat. They just want to move on, so they're making jokes. So if they say, "Oh yeah, I want to try and like crawl inside the Hydra mech," your player did that with a really cool intention.
Mm-hmm.
My player might be saying it as a joke. "Oh yeah, I just want to get inside it." I'd be like, "Okay, roll, let's go." And I find if I just let them try, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, depending. It stops becoming a joke to them. They're like, "Oh, I can try these crazy things," and they start thinking about it more. And they're like, "Yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that." And then I always think the first few sessions, I say few, like 10 or 20, are usually the bits where, unless you're really familiar with your players and they're familiar with you as a DM, you need to teach them, and they need to teach you about what kind of play style you both have. What kind of DM am I? Am I someone who is going to allow these things? Am I someone who's going to shoot down those advances or get mad when you make jokes like that? Mm-hmm. I'm not, but and then you understand the player. If you know this player is a jokester and they are going to come up with these crazy things, then you can start designing combat to have avenues for them to do things. Rather than just things being stat monsters that are there to be killed. You can have things in the environment, certain monsters, certain NPCs, whatever, that allow for that player to do something. And eventually they'll start noticing this. They'll be like, they'll understand their character more. They'll understand how you are as a DM, and they can see it from a different perspective. And it's just about learning to understand them, really.
Nothing to add to that. That is exactly how I feel. Being able to incorporate how other players want to how players want to play and make that accessible to them within the game. Yeah, sure. I think is incredibly 100%. Important. And it challenges you as a GM too to think about something that you wouldn't normally. Like, yeah, I come into it with my expectations and what I would want as a player and what I want as a GM, and then I have a player who's very interested in I don't know, molecular science, and I'm like, all right, not on my usual, but let me do a little research, let me think of some stuff, let me try some stuff out, and let them specifically play with that.
Yeah, I think it's also about like trying to get the player to do what they want, but also understanding the limitations of their character and the world itself. That only comes with time. I think something I did, so my setting was really weird. It was very much, you can do whatever you want. My race selection for my players were, if it is in the monster manual, you can be it. And that is a very difficult situation for a DM to be in, because once a player says, I want to be an aboleth, you go, right, okay. And my rule was, you can be whatever you want, but we need to bring it down to the power level of our level. So if you're a level 3, you've got to be a level 3 aboleth, and we're going to make it work narratively, and we're gonna find a way together to make it all work. And it's also a thing of fudging comes back to railroading and the idea of having this set idea of what you want your world to be and the narrative direction of your world, and then forcing your players to stay on that track. I'm assuming most people who are watching right now will know what railroading is. But it is when you as a DM, like I said, have that idea of what the story is going to be, and then when the players try and deviate off that, you bring them back, and you're like, no, you stay on this track. That's all you can do. So like, oh, we want to explore the mines. Well, I wanted you to go to the castle, so something happens that makes you go to the castle. Or if you're if you're doing it this way, you just say no. You just say, no, you can't go that way. Well, why can't we go that way? Yeah, you're going that way. Like,
road
that's
closed.
Yeah, the fence is too high.
Yeah. The
They're
store
like,
is
"I'll
locked
knock it
from the
down."
other side.
It's like, yeah, you can't go that way. And it's very noticeable to players when you do that. And again, takes them out of the experience and stops being a joint storytelling experience, which is what you're doing as a DM. You're not telling your story, you're telling their story in your world. So let them do it. Like, learning how to adapt to that stuff. I've had sessions where I've had entire things planned, and then the players go, "Oh, we want to go there," and I just go, "Okay," and they just go. Like, my world was this massive desert, and they had a map, and I planned for them to go on a very specific route. NPCs were trying to guide them in a certain direction, like, "Ooh, here are some threads to follow. Ooh." And they were like, "What is that giant hand on the map? There's a giant hand, like a severed hand and a sword. It's massive. What is that?" And I guess that was my fault for drawing a giant severed hand on the map. But they were like, "We're going there." And I was like, "That's like 3 days journey away." They're like, "Yeah, we can do it." And they were like, "We got provisions. Let's go." I was like, "Oh, okay. Right." And you just have to do it. Like, I could have railroaded them and said, got creative and said, "Well, actually, there's a bit of the desert there that's unpassable at this time, and this and that, and blah, 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 blah." But you know what? It's part of the fun of DMing to just be like, yeah, improv, let's go. Like, that's a huge part that I enjoy. Some people absolutely hate not having their plans in front of them. But as someone who doesn't balance combat, improving isn't a hard thing for me, because each area in my world has its NPCs. They're already planned. I know who they are. It has combat encounters that could happen, depending on what the players do. I have all that planned out. It might not be in the most immaculate amount of detail, but because I have those things planned out and I don't balance combat because I'm insane, they can go there, sure. Do I know exactly what the NPCs are going to say? No. Do I know the kind of thread I want them to pull when they speak to these NPCs, what I'm trying to lead them to? Yeah, so just do it. And then the players feel, "Oh my god, I can go wherever I want. I can say whatever I want and do whatever I want." And the world just becomes so much bigger to them. So I think,
Absolutely.
my brain always goes back to, like, I talk about a very similar thing in a video I'm working on at the moment. It's weird how your brain, I'm stuck on that script.
It does that.
Thinking about that too. But yeah, just go with it. And once you do it enough, you'll just be able to improvise it. Back to fudging. It won't be, they rolled a 19, that's what it is. Your brain will go, right, okay, as a DM, how can I create the most fun experience for these players, be it with failure or success, or just letting it roll and just letting it be normal. Like, yeah, they hit, cool. Let's let this go through. Not every hit has to be the world-shattering One Punch Man or a whiff. You can have bits in between. It's just, is it adding anything?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all dependent. That's the problem with pen and paper. It all depends on what happens.
It does. It's incredibly fluid. And oh, also, thanks for the hydrate, B-Pen. I saw that earlier, but
I'll do one as well.
I'll call it out now. I drank when I saw it, but I'll drink again. On that, I want to keep, there's so many avenues to follow, but Discordia had a really good question about 30 minutes ago that we can now get to.
Let's get it.
Really good question where we were talking about enemies and big bads and stuff, and Discordia asks, how do you go about conveying that something might be particularly dangerous without being metagamey about it?
That is really hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's really hard. Something I'm not particular. I guess from like the nature of my world, I'm not. And what happened? The two situations I told you, which was them stealing the telepathy galleon and the Siamese cat with the one-shotting guns. They both just took over that stuff and were like, it's ours now. Maybe I'm not the best person to give advice on this situation. I just think, doing the war thing, like Jimmy said, where you have them beat up a person who is strong, is a very simple way of doing it, but kind of boring, very obvious. But you could do it in a multitude of ways. I just like showing, a lot of the time it's building them up before they show up. You're not front loading everything. You're not just going, it's a galleon that is floating and it's very powerful. You can tell because they're strong and they've got cannons and they shoot the sand. Oh, you have NPCs talk about these things and the problems they're causing and what they've done, so that when they do show up, they've got that in their minds, and then their actions can then show, everything people have been saying is true. Like, we can do this. We have been doing this. That's how I do it, but that's because of how I plan out my world. I expand and I think, all right, who's here? From this town, they could effectively go to 5 different places around here if they wanted. What are the big threats here? In my world, there was this overarching threat, and they had players in all of the towns, but each area had its kind of bad guy, or perceived bad guy, and it's just about building it up and not have it come out of nowhere. But I mean, there is merit in having things come out of nowhere, like that can be but then again, it then becomes super hard to gauge power level. And what you don't want to do is introduce something very quickly that you intend to be absolutely gargantuan. And I'm guilty of this, but this is where I learned from these mistakes. You introduce something that's meant to be this gargantuan threat that they wouldn't even touch in a million years, like the Galleon, and the players go, that's mine. And they find a really creative way of doing it. That is when you can fudge, in my opinion. I probably should have fudged in that situation. Something should have happened where they couldn't do it. Like, no, your sneak roll doesn't pass because there are 20 people on this ship, and they're all looking at you. But the way they did it was super creative, so I was like, this sounds fun. This, but yeah, plan it ahead. Do you have any tips or tricks, Jesse?
It's really hard. It is very, very hard. I do think that having players be aware of it in pieces beforehand can help a lot. Does give it more of a threat. I've had the same thing where I've gone, introduced an enemy and it's like, I was running a space trash sci-fi game and they're like trying to meet someone. They were like, we think they're going to double cross us, and they did their radar scans and they were like, oh, there is a military grade. I was like, yes, you successfully detect that there is a military grade spaceship on the other side of this moon, waiting in high orbit and powered down. And they're like, sweet, we'll take it out. And it's like, it's a military grade. You have the step up from a shuttle. Like, but like if they know, like I'm trying real hard to be like, they're gonna blow you out of space in one go. And like, so having a little more knowledge of that and not being front loaded with it, I think is an excellent examples you give. I think having personal stakes that aren't related to, or personal consequences that aren't related to the player can help. So like, if they take out Big Bad, they know John is terrible person and John is big bad for campaign, but John controls the import of water to a town full of NPCs they like, and they know that if they take John out, that infrastructure will crumble and a lot of people will probably die and just have to move, whatever. Like, terrible things will happen to things they care about if they just rush in recklessly.
Yeah.
Maybe they can take John out physically, but they can't deal with all the aftermath of that. So now, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like not having just showing the power level of an enemy. It's not necessarily showing how strong they are with like a warfing technique. It's about showing how important they are and what will happen if you engage them, or if you kill them, or if you do things. Stakes, like things that could go wrong. I think something that I also think you can do is working with your players. I am a firm believer that again, I've said it multiple times, that it's not my story that I am trying to tell. It is our story. It's a collaborative storytelling situation. And I think that begins at moment one. Whenever I make characters in my games with my players, I don't get them to write me a synopsis of what their character is, and I take it and then I build things around it. Because they can be whatever they want. And people didn't really pick crazy things, but one wanted to be a Warforged, and it was then up to me and him to design the Warforged in my world. And why are they there? What is the things that's happening with their race? And what that does is it gives people investment in their character. They're like, oh, I added to this world. I understand this stuff. And he was, apart from me, who knew the entire world, he was an expert on Warforged in the world. He had all of the knowledge. So the Warforged in my setting had fought a centuries-long war against the Jinn, the Jinn T, they were called, and he knew how powerful they were because he had lost the war. And he was a general, and he had been powered down, and that's why he was leveled down, because he had been turned off for so long. So he knew the threat of the Jinn, and that meant whenever any Jinn turned up, he knew his character and him, the player, knew how powerful they were. Not because I sat there and went, this is really powerful, or an NPC came in and went, that thing's really powerful. That character knew. So he could naturally turn to all of the other players and RP, we shouldn't engage with this thing. It will kill us. And you've just added a new scenario, a new thing, a new way for RP to happen with your players. Sometimes it can be hard to get RP to happen between players. A lot of players are really good at RPing with NPCs, but find it hard to turn and talk to the people next to them and RP with them. I'm sure there's some psychology things that smarter people than I will know. But allow them to have that knowledge and be the expert. Whenever he said anything about the Warforged or the Jinn, sometimes he would just kind of bullshit and make it up because there was something that he didn't know we hadn't discussed. I wouldn't then go, actually, that doesn't line up with my plans. If it isn't going to mess with things, that's the rule. That's it. Then he's the expert. He knows. And that's what I mean by collaborative. And then that's how you can introduce bad guys. You know, one of the players in here knows that these things are super powerful. These things shouldn't be engaged. And that happened in session 1. The first thing they engaged was it was called Malak, the collector, who was all of my players were in this situation and they encountered a Jinn. The first thing they ever encountered was a Jinn who was incredibly fat and was being lifted up by on like a bed, lifted up by a load of bullywugs, and they were walking him around, and he had a giant gorilla. It was weird. But I knew that my Warforged player was going to be like, we can't mess with him. We are level 1. He will just destroy us. Or he was also the Warforged knew who he was. Malek would collect things. He liked to take people and collect them and put them in his collection as slaves and ornaments and stuff like that. And all my players were warned they shouldn't do this, but the bard, surprise, surprise, was like, actually, and just started like talking back to him because he was like, he's not going to do that. I don't believe him, because his character wouldn't believe him. And yeah, he wanted something, and that kicked off the entire campaign. I had a completely different thing, but they started talking back to this Jin who was basically going to show a sign of force and then leave. But they talked back to him and rolled him up to the point where he was like, they lied and said, oh yeah, we can get you this pen or this paintbrush that it's enchanted and can let you paint anything. Like, you can be the best painter if you have this, right? You can just do it. We'll get you that. I can get you that easy for your collection, easy peasy. And he went, all right, you have a week. Bye. And then he like teleported out, and then the Warforged was like, we are fucked. He was like, if we don't do that, we are worse than dead. We are done. And he knows you can't get it. He's playing with you. You're stuffed. And my players were just like, guess we have to find this pen. Which I had never said was a thing. Like, and then the entire quest then went, right, they have a week to go and find this pen. And they never did. I stopped the campaign before they got it. We did like months and months and months and months and months, but I was doing the time frame really different. But they would just go to towns and be like, have you seen a magical paintbrush that can paint anything? And he'd be like, no, that's dumb. And he'd be like, okay, bye. And like leave. But that all stemmed from introducing power levels, understanding threats, and then my player going against it. They're not just going, oh god, we can't do that. He just got creative and was like, I'm gonna mess with this and see what Jay does. What is he gonna do? Kill me? Like, so I just put them in a situation where, you know, I'm not gonna kill you straight out. I'm not gonna TPK on session 1. But you're like, here's an interesting situation. Now get yourself out of it. I didn't know where they're gonna get this paintbrush from. I mean, I planned in later sessions, I was like, okay, I know where it is now, and I know how to get, if they want to get to it, I can hint them towards the right direction. But it's giving them the opportunity to just do the things they want. Don't make super big bad guys that will just one-shot them if they look at them the wrong way.
Right.
I think there's space for that, but I think it's in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of boring. Just have your enemies have wants and needs and flaws, and then play them up, and have that be something that brings their power level down. This is just me giving excuses to not balance your combat. Here are all the things you don't need to do to balance your combat.
It's not that it's imbalanced. It's that it's you know, it's weighed at time of delivery.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. That sounds a lot more professional than not balanced. That sounds better.
Written enough resumes and cover letters in the last couple of weeks that I'm in that mindset. It's like,
yeah,
no, how do we spin this in a positive way?
Yeah.
I totally had that was it. On the subject of stakes, making them feel like a threat and building off what you were talking about with like personal stuff. A thing that you could do is that I did with the specific NPC was gave them the same motivation as the party, and the party was very motivated. Like, they were like, here's what we have to do. And the main villain of that campaign had the same motivation of like, we have to preserve the world in a sense, but had different means for it. And so they understood each other, but they wanted to go about in different ways. But then the players knew how determined this NPC, the lengths that they were willing to go to do what they thought needed to be done. They knew this person would do too, but it would end poorly for them, or like for how they thought, you know, the method that they wanted to use. And so using their own motivation against them, like having them understand, like, this person is just as driven, just as determined, possibly more resourceful.
Yeah.
That's another thing. A good thing is having them, again, what you were saying with bringing up it in pieces, bringing up how resourceful they can be. Like, that they're not just, you know, super strong. Like, they're an oil tycoon who also has, you know, millions in crypto saved up, and has these shell businesses that they do, like they have all these avenues of power, of money, of influence that they can utilize in multiple ways. And
I think it's the players thinking as well. Like, how could I think this is just my perspective, because my players were devils and would turn my things against me, but showing them how much influence they have or resources they have makes the players think, could I do something with that? Could I manipulate that?
Yeah.
Could I take advantage? And then that's just another way of your players to think. I just giving your players all of these avenues, just like, here are all of the threads I could possibly put in front of you. Not just, here is quest 1, here is quest 2, here is quest 3, pick one. But my NPC has all of these flaws and all of these desires. How could you, in the weirdest way possible, manipulate them to get what your character would want? Not in a bad way, but in like a, the barmaid loves milk. Oh my god, my paladin loves milk. That's his only trait. She's made for him. And then you're like, right, there we go, romance. You just got to say that your barmaids like milk, and everything's solved.
Yep,
put that on a t-shirt.
That's how you do it. Yeah, I think giving them just in general with like conveying a threat also, but just absolute please, for the love of all that is holy, give characters, NPCs, big bads, minions, everything, give them motivation, give them expectations, give them flaws, give them things they're good at. Like, really incorporate a character and all the things that come with being alive in that. Doesn't have to be the most fleshed out thing in the world, but just understanding different parts of them at a fundamental level. And then when your players surprise you with something and ask you a question or go somewhere unexpected or do something you're expecting, you can use those small bits of knowledge you have to say, okay, well, in this situation, how would this character, how would this NPC, this big bad, whatever, react based on what I know? Okay, because they're from this location that I've established, because they care about this, and that, because they focus on this in their life, they would probably react like this. That means they would have this resource or this idea, or they would know this person. And you could really just kind of build up from there.
Helps so much of improv as well.
Absolutely.
Being able to have those things jotted down. Like my NPCs would never have well, some of them did, but they would never usually have paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff, mainly because I hate writing, because I've dyslexia. But it would just have motivations, flaws, wants, needs, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's interesting to think, to come back to combat, 90%, again, trying to come away from the numbers game way of thinking about combat, most creatures that have sentience will not just stand there and let 5 people hit them until they are dead.
Yeah.
They will... The one thing they'll probably try to do is run away and get out of there. And I think that's something that a lot of DMs do, which is enemies will just stand and fight until they are dead. And they will just do those things. Think about the creature. Think about where they are, what their motivations are. If it's something that is hunting, so I did a one-shot in the Underdark, and there were creatures, the hook horrors, they were hunting, and they got into combat, and they were the tables turned and the hook horrors started losing. Would something that just wants to eat stand its ground and let 5 people beat the shit out of it till it died? No, it wouldn't. It has the means to escape. It would run. It would probably run as soon as it wouldn't as soon as it didn't get the thing it wanted. It wouldn't stand there and go, guess I'll fight now.
Mm-hmm.
It would try and get someone, be like, oh, I rolled badly. Whoops, metagaming hook horror, bastard. And then he'd go, I'm out of here, and just instantly leave. And I think that's completely valid with combat as well. You don't have to have combat. You have something will happen. If it makes sense for the creature to come in, do a thing, fail or succeed, and then leave, or attempt to leave, then that is what it does. That instills so much more fear in the player's mind than just fighting one hook horror. If one comes down, tries to get someone and leaves, and succeeds in leaving, you are constantly like, where's that hook horror? When is it going to come out? And your players are constantly on guard. And they're thinking about so many different things other than, wow, I'm glad I rolled a natural 20 and that hook horror's dead. What's it got in its belly? You're thinking in a different dimension. And that's what I think's important about that, is just think about the motivation, even if it's just a wolf. What is it trying to do? And thinking in that way will make you think of new things. Well, if it's trying to hunt, is it hunting for just it, or does it have pups? And oh, okay, so in my mind now it has pups. So in my world, there are now little wolf cubs, and you can then incorporate that into your narrative. You can have people stumble across these things again. Okay, well, in this situation, the wolf couldn't get away and it died. Okay, so I know the players are going to come back through this way because it's basically the only way they can go. Well, now what I do is I have the cubs, mourning over the corpse of the mother. Story.
Yep.
Just from you going, is it hunting? Does it have cubs? Okay, there we go. And now the players can go, they can either go, wow, look, cubs, we should take them. Now you've got some pets. Or we should raise them. Or we should take them somewhere where they're safe. Or they'd go, that's meat. And, give your player more avenues to do things. But that all comes from what Jesse said, which is just motivation of every single thing you create. Think from its perspective. Who's it hunting for? Does it have cubs? Think about that with a lich. Think about that. Does it have cubs?
Does your lich have cubs? Very important.
Yeah, it is.
Lampy said, had to step away for a bit. Has Jay said ludonarrative dissonance yet?
No, but it's in the script of my latest video. I found a way to worm it in. I already said it twice, including this. So it's all good. Oh, God.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's important. The way I do lexicon. So the way you make a character in that is you actually do describe them in what's called their qualities, which is a phrase or a short phrase or a word that describes something about them, and it's either their motivation, what motivates them, their trait, what they are at their core, something they can't change, or a skill, something they've learned.
Yeah.
And I use that, and that's actually their character sheet. But I use that when I play other games too, and I'm like, well, what's something about them they can't change, and that's important. What are the things that they've learned, and what are the things that motivate them, and always play that into. And like if I'm using something with set stats, if I'm looking through a manual and it's like, here's an NPC and it's just, here's goon number 4 and they have a whip, and it's like, okay, cool, how do I play that? At this point they're just stats, but I don't want them to be. Why do they have a whip? Why does that matter to them?
Yeah.
Do they perform before they got into henching? Did they get into it because they needed insurance and they were at the Ren Fair before, but it's just what they weren't cutting it, but they had like their whip show and they were like, well, this is what I'm good with, so guess I'm using this now. Like, really dig into those bits and make it even better.
And you can improv off that. Like, what happens if your party for some reason kills 3 of the 4 henchmen and get whip henchmen? Like, if you don't think about those things, they're gonna grab him and go, who do you work for? And you'll go, he bit a cyanide pill, he's dead.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, you can't improv because you're just like, I haven't thought about this henchman's motivations. And it doesn't need to be deep. How do you get the whip? Why is he doing what he's doing? Okay, cool. Then you can just go. You can just jump off. And even if you're not confident with improv, and I know a lot of people aren't, me included, but doing those things and putting yourself in those situations and saying yes to your players when they want to do things will force you to do it. And then you'll just get comfortable with being in your world and just being like, maybe what I said right there wasn't exactly what I had in mind now that I think about it in hindsight, but players went along with it. That
Mhm.
to them, that's exactly what happened because that was the character.
Yep.
And you just do it, and that's that.
Yeah, I also feel like I'm pretty average on the improv spectrum. But a thing that makes it so much easier is having those things set. So if you are, whoever is listening, if you don't feel as confident about your improv, that is a huge way to step it up, because it gives you, improv is about using information to build on something, and that's exactly what that kind of thing is allows you to build and change as new stuff gets introduced, how it all works together, and then how you can move forward with it.
Beautifully put.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah. And fudge all your dice.
Lampy says, Jay, what do you do if one of your it just moved if one of your players, let's say they're a giant mushroom and tries to steal a door mid-combat?
Okay. We're gonna get into this, are we? I would. It's all about framing. So if we bring it
is a
into
door, that's
my
fair.
game, my game and my world. Say there is a mushroom person in my my game. In my one, there would probably be a myconid. I would be like, right. So is the door sentient? That's important. And how are they gonna go about doing this? And I need to ask them. So like, Jesse, if you were, let's just say, crazy situation, you're a mushroom person,
never would happen,
and you were trying to steal a door, I would say, okay, so you want to steal a door. How are you going to do this?
I'm going to take it off its hinges.
All right.
First step, get it off, so I can, take it.
Yeah, so when you get up to the door and you look at the hinges, they are bolted shut with iron bolts. It looks like they're just held in via force. There's no welding. It's just held there by the weight of the door and the pressure fit of the iron. It's pretty hefty. What are you gonna do about that?
Oh man, that's so nice. All right, I will. I know you like creativity, so I'm gonna go a little extra. I'm gonna summon my absolutely meant for combat cannon, because I'm an artificer.
Beautiful.
And I'm gonna have it wedge itself under the door, and then use it almost like a jack to kind of put pressure off of the door, so that if this is held on by the weight, then it will more easily be able to lift off once you have the balance correct, and then you can ease it up.
So in that situation, you can do one of two things.
Okay.
You can either make them do a roll, or in my case, I'll go, I like that. Yeah, you succeed.
Yeah, good job.
That works. I can see that working. So yeah, cool. Let's move on. Next thing.
I think that's a really great example too, because this is, in this scenario, it is mid-combat, and you have said in this, like, cool, your turn in this round of
your
combat,
action is to do this.
Yeah, and then next turn, it's like, sweet, I've done the thing I wanted to do. Now I am free to, like, shoot off a spell, do whatever I want to do in actual combat, because I've done the thing that I needed to do, especially if combat goes sideways and we need to get out of there. I'm okay with running because I've got the door.
I got the door. And also, like, when it comes down to doing a roll or not doing a roll and just treating it as an action, it again comes down to, like, how is it going to serve the narrative? If in this combat, this mushroom character, who will remain unnamed, is fumbling at this door, constantly trying to get it off for the entire duration of combat, some situations that could be funny, that could be comedic, I'm fumbling. A lot of the times it's not. The player who plays that character is not going to think back on that combat and go, that was cool. This was awesome. But they had an idea. I want to take the door off for whatever reason. So you just like, okay, is it more interesting to let them fumble and fail, or possibly succeed, or do I just let them succeed? Because it's not that difficult. This is feasibly something you do. So just let them succeed and then see what they come up with. What are they going to do? Are they just going to like take the door and run away because they wanted the door? Fine. Do they want to yeet the door at a goblin's head? Fine. That's way more interesting than them going, at the door for 5 turns. So just allow for that to go forward. But it's all, again, with pen and paper games, it all depends. If they're saying, I want to rodeo the dragon and take its necklace off in one fluid motion and do a backflip and land in the splits, I might make you do a roll for that. And it might take more than 1 turn, like, because it's this extravagant.
Quite a few actions.
Yeah.
But rodeo the dragon is my favorite maneuver with the dragon, though. So.
It's the number one.
Yeah.
If I see a dragon, I'm getting on that.
Yeah,
I'm writing that.
I'm gonna rodeo it.
Because even if you die, you're like, we've built up this dragon. He's super powerful, but that's how you go down in a blaze of glory, by literally like full pelt running at a dragon, going, "I'm gonna ride you," and then he just blasts you. That's how you go. That's how you get out, and that's memorable. That's how did your character die? I was running full pelt at a dragon trying to ride it. I mean, there are better ways to go, but you're like, cool. If it's like, it's that, or you're like, I was fumbling by a door for 5 turns. You would never tell that story to a friend. You're having a drink at the pub, and you're like, they want to get into D&D or any pen and paper game, and they're like, oh yeah, I've always heard these really cool stories, and you're like, yeah. Last week there was a combat right with these goblins, and I wanted the door, and I stood there for 5 turns, and I still didn't get it off. But when the combat was over, I got the door. It was great.
What a
or you
story!
Said, yeah, I rodeoed a dragon. It was 1 action. Like, cool. That's awesome. This is what people want from pen and paper games, I think. And I'm being general here. If you enjoy the numbers game, more power to you. Genuinely, no sarcasm in that at all. More power to you. But I think people do want those memorable character moments that they think it would be so cool if my character could do this. And if it makes sense and it fits within the confines of your world and the power level of the creature and your players and everything, do it. That's like, but that's just me. That's just me as a DM.
No, I fully agree with that. I feel very similarly. Leuwani, I'm probably saying that wrong. Talk about how make sure you don't have things keep running and then frustrating players. So I think the scenario they bring up is like building up a dragon, but it keeps running away, and then frustrating players because they need to completely hunt it down. Yeah, with all things, balance and a sense of, is it the story that you're going to want to tell that like this dragon ran away 5 times, or is it like, is that built into it? Can you build into that like a sort of Team Rocket style thing where the idea is that you are going to face this multiple times, and like knowing which one you want it to be and then building specifically around that.
Yeah.
And if players don't want to Team Rocket it and they make that very clear, be like, okay, we're going to change this a bit. Like they are able to not do that.
For sure. Gotta make sense. Narrative always trumps motivation in my mind. Like, yeah, you could have the dragon or the wolf or the hook horror run away repeatedly because that's what it would do. But is that, if it's done it once or twice, is that boring? Yeah, it's succeeded in its attempt to escape via a dice roll. But on this second attempt, on this third attempt to try and leave, and the paladin attempts to try and grab it by the leg and pull it back down as it jumps away, it succeeded in its role. But is it more cool that they finally caught them? And then they can have a new interesting thing to do? It's way more interesting. So, fudge it. Just, oh yeah, you just got it. Oh
yeah.
Oh. That's how you fudge.
It starts to slip through your hand, but you actually grab like the hair, the fur coming off the leg, and you have a handful of fur, and it's like, that's what you've got. You don't have a good grip on its leg yet, but you've got the fur. Can't leave yet. Like, yeah.
New situation, boom. Instead of it just leaving again. I think that's a great thing to come to, which is just you just have to see in the situation what works best for your story and your player's story and what works. But yeah, motivation is a good place to begin with all of that. Then you just build off
Absolutely.
it.
Insightful asks a good question. How often do you ask your players for a roll, but as a GM, have basically given the PC guaranteed success and just want to see what happens with the dice roll? If you want, I've got to answer, but if you want to answer that first, you can.
I do that. I do that in the reverse, which is I roll a dice, and I look. Yeah, okay. I guess that just comes into the nature of me being a serial fudger. But if you're like, it would be really cool if this happened. I will only be like, okay, yeah, roll for it. Even though I've made up my mind, I'm like, I want this to happen. This would be really cool. Only if the failure of it is just as interesting, and will create another interesting situation. Otherwise, like we were speaking about with the door, succeeding with the door expands possibilities of fun things to happen. Failure of the door could be funny, but maybe not repeatedly. Like we were coming back to repeated failure. Right. So I'd be like, yeah, okay. Maybe in that situation, I would have them roll. They roll a natural one, or they roll beneath what they need to roll. The failure is funny once, but maybe the next time I just let it happen. You know, and you can justify that in many different ways. Of being like, oh yeah, you've tried it once. You've got good purchase on it. You know where the weakness is, so now you can get it off. You don't need to roll again.
Yeah.
There are loads of ways you need to do it. Yeah, I'll get them to roll just if it has to be equal. There has to be a reason, an interesting reason for them to fail, be it comedy or another cool situation, another branch for them to follow. What's you, Jesse?
So I guess a couple things. One, Blade actually brought this up in the chat.
Yeah.
About an hour ago at this point, or longer. That like he said sometimes playing in some of the games that we've played where he's like, I just rolled the dice to hear the noise. Like I already knew the thing. So I feel like part of it. Yeah, like that. Like I feel like especially in you can't have dread without hope. That's like a core of horror that I believe in, and like even if you're not going like super horror like Lovecraftian or anything, like you're just like the fear of failure, like that chance that you could succeed or fail. I think using things like a dice roll, but you know the outcome is fair, and to add that element of rather than just saying, yeah, you pass, I like it, still roll that dice for the sound.
Yeah.
The other thing is success at a cost. Like I believe you can do this. Like JM8, you wanna try something, and within character, I think you can do it. But the dice represent chaos, represent things outside of your control. So is there something that you are unaware of? So you roll the die and you fail miserably. You roll super low. It's terrible. It's an awful roll. Okay, you're competent enough that you succeeded at getting the door off of the hinges or whatever.
Yeah.
But, and then I get to introduce, it's not as sturdy as you thought, or it took some damage, or the people that are in combat really like that door, and now you're the target of everybody's attention.
Yeah.
Because you just stole their prized door. Like, so having that failure and having it, you know, if they pass, cool, they get the door, things move forward, cool. But if they fail, oh, what's the twist? They still get it, but I love success at a cost.
For sure. That's wonderful. And as long as in the moment you can creatively come up with those things, and it comes back to improv, players are going to want to do weird things. You then have to be a good designer, and we all have designers in our brains of, okay, well, what is success? What is success at a cost, if need be? What is failure? And what is just doing it, you know, casually? And you weigh it up and you go, okay, can I create something interesting here? Yes or no? I can't really, you know, I'm tracking so many different enemies. I'm doing all these different things. I can't think of something right now. I don't think you kind of let it fail and then stumble and think, I guess this happens. Like if you don't have anything in that moment, just either let it succeed or serial fudge it and let it fail once and then get them again the next time when you have time to think about it. It's just about always coming back to that and thinking, can I create different variables for my player to think about? Can I create interesting situations? And I think one of the problems with Dungeons and Dragons is a lot of players forget that even though there are a strict set of rules and there are a strict set of things you can do, your players can basically do, within reason, can do anything. As long as you are expanding the rules to that. Like, you can stick to the rules strictly however much you want. But if you expand it and be like... I think there was a message in chat. Can't see it. I think Doc said it, which is one of the problems is like with like skirmishing and ambushing and stuff is that there aren't any good ways to counteract that in the handbook and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jesse described with grabbing the hair, the player or the DM can create these situations within reason that don't need a rule. I mean, grapple is such a contentious thing in D&D because it's just grim. I just don't do grapple rules. Does it make sense that I could grab the leg of this thing and pull it down if I wanted to? Well, it's up to you as the DM to make that decision, rather than being like, oh, okay, wait, I have to, this combat that we're in that is already really slow because we're playing in D&D. Well, I have to wait and get the rules out, and I have to read the rules and go, actually, no, you can't do that. Okay, next.
Right.
To me, that's not fun. That's some people do. Some people love that stuff. All power to you. I don't think that is interesting to me as a DM or the player. They had an idea. Does it make sense in the world? Yes, it happened. Mm-hmm. Cool. Keep the train moving. Let's go. Not a railroaded train. It's off the track.
just the free range train.
Yeah. Be a free, fast-moving, going through the forest train. Mm-hmm. It's on fire as well.
Yeah.
And it's not balanced.
As
and
trains
it's made
do.
of fudge.
Yeah, and it's made of fudge.
But yeah, for sure.
It's what a great train.
I'd get on that train.
The rolling, flaming forest treading train, yeah, with no tracks.
And it's made of fudge. So
and it's made of fudge.
You imagine slightly warm on the inside. Outside's on fire, right? On the inside, it's like slightly warm fudge. It's like, you can just be like, this is going a bit fast. Scoop up a load of fudge. I feel better now.
Very soft seats. To sit on fudgy, soft seats.
Yeah. It's like memory foam because you kind of like sink into it a little bit. You get those bum prints.
Yeah, those memory fudge.
Yeah, memory fudge. It's a dark image we have conjured.
It's like almost 2, which is our 2-hour cutoff point. We've been talking for 2 hours. This is great.
Oh my lord, it doesn't feel like that.
I know. I love it. I love talking shop with people who also enjoy it. As a game designer, like I really, it's so nice to just be like, yeah, it's technical stuff, but like in a narrative and like fluid sense, as opposed to just being like hard numbers.
It's lovely to get to talk about it because like my series is so like design technique, mechanics. It's nice to talk about it in the when you talk about narrative, it's much grander, it's much bigger than just these are mechanics, these are design techniques. And I don't really get the opportunity to. Well, I say that I'm in charge of my own show. I haven't really expanded into that, and it's really nice to come on here and just be able to wax about it with you. It's super nice. Super nice.
Aw. Thank you. I'm really glad. I'm glad you had fun, because I had fun too. Hey, Side Legoblin. Thanks for following.
Oh, what champ?
Oh, hopefully you were watching and you were like, ooh, cool. This is nice. That's why. All right, so we're wrapping up. So is there anything specific that we didn't cover about fudging in combat that you're like, I have to get this out into the world right now?
I think over the last 2 hours, we kind of touched on a lot of things. I just feel like fudging, in my opinion, is okay as long as it serves the narrative and it is creating interesting gameplay for your players. Not because you're railroading because it's not what you want. I didn't want them to kill it with a natural 20. It doesn't happen. I don't think you should be fudging then. Let the dice sit and just go for it. But if it's gonna serve the narrative in a certain way and it's going to create more variables for your player to have interesting things to do, fudge away. Just be really sneaky about it. Don't do what I do, which is squint and go, oh yeah, that hits. And then they're like, you're fudging. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not.
No,
I'm definitely not fudging.
not at all.
I'm not fudging. Yeah, just as long as it serves your players and your world, go for it. Don't let anyone tell you what you can do. And if you're never going to fudge ever because you think what the dice says is what the dice does, I love the chaos. Hell yeah, more power to you.
Yeah,
doesn't mean you're wrong.
If you're gonna do it that way, I recommend no screen. Just freaking throw those dice, let everybody see it, and that. If you're not gonna fudge, I think that's a great way to do it because
100%.
It shows off, and it's there's an added level of tension when someone's gonna be seeing what's rolled versus just hearing it from you. That pause of you adding numbers can be fun when you're playing with the numbers and stuff, but if it's just a raw dice roll,
there's a certain amount of there's such a huge amount of excitement that comes with that. And it's when it's not to do with your specific roles, which are do I hit, can I do can I do the thing I'm attempting to do. When it's the DM and they're this thing could kill you, here's the roll. That is something you don't get in video games. It's such a powerful feeling, especially when you got 5, 6 friends or however many people you're playing with around you. Nothing beats it. It's so good.
Yeah,
so good.
King Dead bringing up, always make sure the DM and the players are all on the same page of what kind of game you want to play. I did a whole panel at GalaxyCon about Session 0, and the key component of that is that how to make sure everybody is on the same page, because it is that important. So yes, hard agree. Where'd it go? Someone asked what the next video you are doing is. Oh, Talion did. And highlighted it, if you could say.
What is the next video? I'm thinking. I've edited the entire thing today. No, I storyboarded it. It is on. This is why I'm struggling. It is technically on Returnal, which is the PS5 spooky alien roguelike.
Yeah.
Specifically because Nick was like, Jay, you should make an episode on Returnal. I like Returnal. You should make one on Returnal. I was like, all right. And Nick suggested that I make one on. I'm not sure he'll be happy that I'm saying this. I will ever. That I make one on Atmosphere, the atmosphere of Returnal, which is dense and so well designed, but it fades off rather quickly. It slowly diminishes over time, and this isn't any fault of the developers. It is a fundamental flaw in game design that we are still trying to solve, and it hasn't been solved yet. So the video is on Returnal, but it is more so on atmosphere design, and how we solve those problems. So it's covering lots of different games like Binding of Isaac and Celeste and loads of different games. So in my mind, it's not on Returnal. It's on lots of things, so I struggle to remember. But yeah, no, it's not Elden Ring. Ha!
Got him.
Not for a while. Not going to be touching that for a while.
Do you take suggestions on
100%. I would love suggestions.
Have you played Observation?
No.
I really loved it. I would like to play it again, honestly. it's a game where you play the AI in a like spaceship station thing, trying to help the human person in the spaceship after a catastrophic thing, and you get rebooted and neither of you know what happened.
Oh, cool.
I loved it, and it was a lot of weird mechanics and a lot of really interesting stuff. I think was it we were talking on during the movie night yesterday and talking about how like weird games aren't super common anymore as they used to be like 20 years ago. And it's one of those that like it handles some really weird stuff, and I think you might enjoy it. I don't know if you'll especially love it or be like, this is weird, A for effort, but like I would be curious, because I really enjoyed it, and I think they do a lot of interesting stuff that you might want to sink your teeth into.
Yeah, maybe I should stream it and then see if it's double up. Stream it and see if it's an episode type of game. That'd be really, really cool. Double get that.
Ooh,
it was
yeah.
BAFTA winning. Won a BAFTA. Cool.
Oh, did it? Oh, that's cool. Yeah, not on I'm on observation duty. That's a different game. Also a fun game though, but not the one.
I think I have that Kronk. Anodyne 2.
Which one?
Anodyne. I own it. I've never played it. Like with 95% of my Steam library, I get humble bundles every month.
Big mood.
And just games.
they're just in there.
Observation is great. Confirmed by Honey Money.
Oh, good. Well, if Honey Money says it's great, then I don't have to worry about it because it's official now.
Well, that's 2 people saying it's great, so that it must be true. That's how facts work.
That's true. You can look that up in Science Magazine.
Yeah. Page 1.
Yeah, it's true. All right. Thank you, JM8. This was really fun. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
I've
had a wonderful time. If there's an opportunity that I can come back and we can wax about another topic, be whatever it is, I'm 100% down. I've immensely enjoyed my time with you and your wonderful audience. It's been great.
Thank you.
I loved it.
You will absolutely come back, like it or not, because yeah, I had a lot of fun. So when we'll talk work schedule and then have you in on another day, because you're a delight to talk to about stuff.
Same to you, bud. Awesome.
Thanks.
Plans. We'll convene in private on the schedules. We're busy boys.
We shall. So thank you everybody who showed up. You're all awesome as always. Thanks for the new people that showed up too. Like, it's always cool to rope in new people.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Yeah, anything you need to plug outside of your other stuff that you would like to say? Your Patreon is there. I mentioned at the beginning, but now there's new people.
If you want to check out my Patreon and support me directly making my episodes, I would appreciate it immensely. Don't feel pressured. They get early episodes, behind the scenes filming and all that jazz. But if not, I will have a new episode out on The Escapist Tuesday. It's going to be coming out on Friday, patrons, because that's when I'm going to finish it and I instantly upload them. But other than that, oh yeah, I have a podcast coming up that will come out at some point because it's 6 hours long, and my computer is going to struggle to render that. So,
oh my gosh.
We will see. But yeah, check out Anatomy on The Escapist. Check out my personal channel and my Patreon and all that. And
what's your personal channel on Twitch?
Personal channel is just JM8. JM8 on YouTube.
What's your Twitch?
I should be the top result. I bloody hope.
Because I was going to put it in chat, and I thought it was twitch.tv/JM8, and then it tells me that doesn't exist. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, because you can't have 3 letters. My Twitch is it's JM8. So like, I'll type something in chat, then people can see that. That's me, guys.
Oh, okay. There we go.
It's JM8, yeah, because you can't have 3 digits as your name in Twitch, which I hate.
Wow. Dang, Twitch.
So it's me. But yeah.
Cool. All right.
All that jazz. Check it out.
Should. Everybody should. All right. We're gonna stop now. Thanks everybody again. You're still the best. I told you once, I'll tell you again. Come back, I'll tell you a third time. It's what I do.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all have a good one.
Bye, guys.